Hi friends, and welcome to July 2023. This is the Futurecast, and I'm your host and cosmic coach, Moriel Loren. A biblical testing period of epic proportions starts right now. July kicks off a 3-month series of overlapping retrogrades that by the end of the summer in September will have completely transformed our relationships, finances, aesthetics, gender dynamics, as well as our social karma. This 3-month retrograde series during the summertime is going to include a rewriting of our traditional Romeo and Juliet love story. It's also going to include the largest government takeover of private banking in U.S. history. And it all kicks off this month in July with a time period mentioned in both the Bible and Buddhism. So let's take a look at how these geocosmic patterns are going to affect your life, love, business, and the globe. I'm ready if you are, so let's dive in. Have you ever heard the expression 40 days and 40 nights? It appears in the Bible as a testing period for 3 key Christian figures: Noah, Moses, and Jesus. According to legend, Noah survived the Great Flood for 40 days and 40 nights. Moses wandered through the wilderness with the Hebrews for 40 days and 40 nights. Jesus contemplated in the desert, refusing temptation from the devil for 40 days and 40 nights. And then even after his crucifixion, Jesus remained on earth for 40 days and 40 nights. Then over in Eastern tradition, the Buddha meditated underneath a Bodhi tree before reaching enlightenment or samadhi for 40 days and 40 nights. And in Hollywood, there's a popular film about celibacy and romance starring Josh Hartnett called 40 Days and 40 Nights. But I bet you didn't know that 40 days and 40 nights is actually an astrological reference. Once every 18 months, the planet Venus goes retrograde for 40 days and 40 nights. Venus is our symbol of love, money, women, and aesthetics. So during her 40-day retrograde or withdrawal period, it's a metaphor for a time frame in our life where we withdraw from or abstain from the usual pleasures and distractions of the outside world, so that we can do an inward assessment about whether or not we're really living in alignment with our values. Now, during that time period where we're withdrawing and sustaining, we might feel tempted to step outside of our values, or we might feel that we're choosing to go without our usual comforts so we can get more in touch with our values. So this year, from July 22nd to September 3rd, is that review period regarding love, money, women, and appearances. And it might kind of hurt a little. So this year, the Venus retrograde is coupled with 2 other overlapping retrogrades. The first is the 6-month Chiron retrograde from around summertime till about Christmas. This is the metaphorical time period of the wounded healer. So Chiron in conjunction with Venus is going to bring up some of your deepest pains, shame, vulnerability, and regrets in the areas of love, money, women, and appearances. Then on top of that, next month from around August 27th to September 15th, you'll have an overlapping Mercury retrograde or review period of the messenger that's going to have some really important conversations about everything that's coming up. So by the end of the summertime, there's going to be several overlapping retrogrades that are really going to initiate serious transformation in those key areas. In fact, this biblical testing period is so important that I've created a summertime special report to break it down for you step by step, and we're about to dive into that. Little tidbit, especially for those of you listening that have lots of planets in your personal birth chart that are in the fixed signs of Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, or Taurus, then This year's Venus retrograde is going to be especially intense for you. So you're definitely going to want to come see me. Just use the retrograde relief discount that's at the bottom of this page, and we'll talk about everything. One of the major themes that gets reviewed during this biblical testing period is our relationships. So themes you might experience include unrequited love, unavailable love, putting love on the back burner, or breakups and then makeups, and then usually breakups again. So what does this mean? Unrequited love could mean you have an experience where you're interested in somebody and they don't return your feelings, or you don't even get noticed no matter how hard you're trying to put yourself out there. Unavailable love could mean that the person you're interested in is not available. Maybe they're still finishing a relationship. Maybe they're away traveling or on a work assignment. Or maybe they live a long distance from you and for some reason are unable to get to you to pursue the relationship. Then the notion of putting love on the back burner. Maybe you're just focused on other priorities in your life right now, or maybe they are. And so love is just not on your radar whatsoever. And then the notion of breakups, makeups, and oftentimes breakups again. Usually, if we needed to exit a relationship, actually Venus retrograde can be the perfect time for that. So if you needed to end some romantic or even business partnership, then you may find that that occurs during July, August, or September of this year. Now, sometimes people are tempted to get back with their exes or go back on their thought of breaking up. So you might have a little makeup. Really take that into serious consideration about whether or not you think it's going to last. More often than not, when there's a breakup followed by a makeup, there is usually a breakup again after that. So what should you do about relationships during this 40-day testing period? Well, number one, you have an opportunity to really rewrite your love story. Meaning, if you have a pattern of dating or a pattern of how you are in relationships, then it's time to possibly change that. So really think about how you want your love story to evolve moving forward and make the changes in yourself or the partners that you're selecting to make sure that you're really getting what you want in alignment with your values. Another approach to this 40-day period of testing relationships could mean that you need to take a break from the dating spree, right? Take a break and fall more in love with yourself. Focus on you, and then you'll come back to the dating game with, a more refreshed and centered perspective. The other thing that you might do, like I mentioned before, is choose to end a relationship if it's gotten to the point of no return. Don't be afraid of a graceful exit. For those of you who are in a relationship, you're probably having the where do we go from here conversation during this summer. That can mean you're kind of in a limbo space in between big steps in your relationship, like should we move in together? Should we get engaged? Should we make this more official in some way? And you're kind of in this lag time period deciding about whether or not you're going to make that next big commitment. Or the where should we go from here conversation could mean something's come up in your relationship and you're deciding whether or not you're going to keep it. So it may turn into the should I stay or should I leave conversation. Now, for those of you who are single, you're probably having the internal where's the love conversation, meaning you might be taking a break from dating so that you can love on yourself. If you've been giving a lot out there in the marketplace to other people, maybe it's time for you to turn that attention more inwards and love on you for a while. Now, the other reason you might be having the where's the love conversation with yourself is you may feel like it's really impossible to get a date during this 40-day Venus retrograde period. Like love is just somehow unavailable to you. I remember one of the last times that Venus went retrograde during May and June of 2020, during the pandemic year. And I couldn't get a date. And the irony of it was, of course, love was literally unavailable. Remember during the pandemic and we were all locked down and we weren't supposed to be going places and we weren't supposed to be socializing and we weren't supposed to be coming into physical contact with people. And so literally I couldn't go out there and find love. Love was just completely unavailable to me. And then even when I would go out in public, to grocery stores and run basic errands and I would try to smile at people and be friendly, It was like everybody was afraid of human interaction. So no matter how nice I was being, trying to put myself out there, it was like I didn't exist. Nobody even noticed me. So I remember during that Venus retrograde period being totally single and alone. And I actually felt kind of lonely and unattractive. All right, now here's a warning for everybody. Watch out for the, well, that looks like a good time conversation this summer, because there is a huge temptation to possibly have an affair or to reunite with an ex. So, fair word of warning. During a Venus retrograde cycle, love affairs rarely go smoothly. So if you're currently having an affair, cut it. You're probably going to get caught during the summertime Venus retrograde, and it's going to blow things up with you, your partner, your family, your reputation. So if you need to cut an affair, now is a really smart time to do so. And if you're even feeling tempted to do something like that, then why don't you go back to your relationship first and see if you can either reconcile with your partner or officially end things with your partner, so that way you don't have the pressure of sneaking around. Now, the whole thing about returning with an old flame. Exes are bound to come up again. They're going to text you, they might call you, say they happen to be in town for an occasion, they might start pinging you on social media. You got to use your good judgment about whether or not you think that this ex holds genuine intentions for trying to reconnect with you, or whether they're just looking for attention. And you got to be careful, because if they're just looking for attention, then they may loop you into this attraction for a couple of weeks during the Venus retrograde. And then sure enough, as soon as the Venus retrograde is over, boop, they're off back doing whatever it was they were doing before they suddenly reached out. You might end up with hurt feelings again. So be really mindful, especially in the areas of affairs and reuniting with exes. Don't say I didn't warn you. On the world stage regarding relationships, we can definitely count on seeing in the news where some really epic relationships end and some of them temporarily reunite. So remember things like when all of a sudden Brangelina was no more? And then remember when Bennifer was no more and then Bennifer got back together again? We can also count on some probably really notorious sex and relationship scandals coming out in the public eye. So remember when President Trump had an affair with the porn star Stormy Daniels, and that whole trip came out in the news. Now, on top of it, we can anticipate that relationships come up in discussion in terms of relationship rights as well across diverse communities. Like, remember in the past when we used to always have to debate the rights of gay marriage and things along those lines. During the 3-month summer Venus retrograde, we could also see some technical glitches or even legal issues with really popular dating apps in terms of their safety and efficacy. So like remember a few years ago when Tinder and Grindr had some lawsuits brought against them in terms of the safety of their users identifying who they're really meeting with. Also this summer, a major review of traditional masculine and feminine roles in relationships is probably going to get turned on its head. So nowadays, more women than men are going to college and getting advanced degrees. On top of that, many of these women are out earning their male partners. And then the economy is largely controlled by women because women tend to be the biggest consumer spenders. So they're doing a lot of the traditional breadwinning aspects of a relationship. But in addition to this, many of these same women are still expected to fulfill their traditional female roles, such as caretaking, household duties, and social planning. One of the most interesting trends among divorce attorneys right now is that they are reporting two things. Number one, that more women file for divorce than men. And number two, that one of the biggest reasons women are filing for divorce is, quote, that they claim that they don't need men anymore. And they're also saying that, quote, they're emotionally unfulfilled and that men aren't doing the emotional work. Now, that's just an opinion, but it is interesting that it is reflective of a social trend that needs to be discussed amongst the people and how we want to have our relationships. So you can bet that there's going to be a lot of discourse about that this summer. Money is another key topic that gets reviewed during this 40-day Venus retrograde period. Some themes you might possibly experience include income loss, financial delays, possible layoffs or unemployment, and the revival of side gigs. So the income loss, for a lot of people, business is pretty slow right now. So you may find that you're not seeing as many clients or you're not making as many customer sales. The notion of layoffs and unemployment could come up. If you work for a big corporation, they're also being affected by this Venus retrograde. So unfortunately, they might make some staff cuts. Debts and paying off those debts may also show up for you during the Venus retrograde. So if you owe money to a person or you owe money to an institution like a bank or the government, you can pretty much bet that your lender is going to come calling. And a great thing is we might see a lot of revival of side hustles and gig economy, meaning people are getting out there and getting creative and entrepreneurial, trying to make a little extra cash to keep themselves afloat, which is exciting actually for the economy as a whole to see that whole new spread of creativity and people putting their effort out there in new ways. So here's what you should do during this 40-day period of financial review. Number 1, focus on minimizing expenses. Number 2, pay off your debts as much as possible. Number 3, if it's relevant to you, quit a job that you hate. It's actually the perfect time to walk away from something that you don't really want anymore anyways and go somewhere else and make money in a way that you love. And number 4, don't be shy about starting a side hustle. It's always great to have a little bit of extra cash on hand. It can't hurt anybody. So if you're currently employed, then you're probably having the am I going to make it conversation with yourself, meaning you're either trying to survive layoffs and staffing cuts at a company, or you're hoping that you're going to make your monthly number at the end of the month. Now, if you're currently unemployed, then you're probably having the why is no one hiring conversation with yourself. This could mean you're experiencing non-responsiveness to the resumes you're putting out there and the interviews that you're trying to book. Nobody's answering you or responding or showing interest. Or it could mean that you're experiencing delays in your employment start date, meaning you've been accepted for an interview and they want to start you, but for some reason they can't start your paycheck until later this summer. So there's going to be a delay in you kicking off that job and getting your money. Now, for all of us, whether you're employed or unemployed or have a business at any level, the most important question we can all be asking ourselves this summer is, am I living within my means and in alignment with my values? Why? Because financial self-care always looks good on everyone. On the world stage, we might see another major banking crisis this summer. So remember how earlier this year when Silicon Valley Bank and Silver Bank suddenly tanked? And then also keep your eye out for continued devaluation of the US dollar. I mean, how can we forget when the BRICS nations tried to get together to oust good old Benjamin Franklin and replace it with their own new currency? Then also keep an eye out for major corporations that might, have some problems that result in big layoffs. I mean, remember when Citigroup completely collapsed and it was the largest layoff, I think, in US history? And don't forget to keep an eye on that push for national digital currencies around the world. Let's not forget how China and Canada placed many of their citizens' bank accounts exclusively on their phones associated to a social trust score. And then when the government decided that they didn't like what you were doing, talking about, or disagreeing with their politics, they simply deleted your bank account. Okay, so keep an eye out in the news for what happens on the dates of Friday, July 21st and Saturday, July 22nd, maybe into Sunday, July 23rd. Not only does this signify the start of that Venus retrograde and Chiron retrograde cycle, but it aligns with the indictment date set by the Department of Justice for former President Trump. But even more importantly, the Venus retrograde kickoff aligns perfectly with the Fed Now program said to be launched by the Federal Reserve across all commercial banks nationwide. Once this is implemented, it'll represent the largest government takeover of private banking in U.S. history. Another key transformation during the 40-day, 40-night biblical testing period of the Venus retrograde this summer is the topic of women. So what you may experience is that there is an influential woman who is co-present in your life. This could be a sister, a mother, friend, lover, colleague, but for better or for worse, depending on how you handle it, she plays a defining feature in whatever this summertime drama is that you've got going on. So somehow you really need to get right with the women in your life. And you may find that a woman could either be instrumental in some of the best progress you make this summer, or it could be that there's an issue with one of these women in your life that is sucking the air out of the room. Now, another thing that will show up during the summer is the notion of women's rights and also the redefining of what we've conventionally considered traditional women's roles in the world. Also, on the world stage, missing women and missing children will become a conversation topic that politically we just cannot ignore. So what should you do during this period? Number one, focus on supporting the women in your life as best you can. Your female colleagues, your friends, your relatives, your spouse, your children. Just focus on the women in your life and showing up for them as best as you possibly can. And within yourself, whether you're a man or a woman or however you identify, focus on reclaiming what we would call the traditional yin or omega or more feminine qualities like self-nurturing, play, caretaking, rest, time off, and pleasure. If you're a woman, you may be having the what does it mean to be a modern woman conversation with yourself, meaning this summer you might really be feeling the pressure of bearing the weight of both masculine and feminine traditional roles in your life, and you may feel overextended and tired of having to carry both things. Or for some women, you may be really redefining that modern woman story of what it means to have it all. What does that mean to have it all for yourself on your own terms? What does that look like? And it doesn't have to necessarily match the social expectations that are being sold to us in images and stories and media. Now, if you're a man, you might be asking yourself the question, how can I show up as a better ally to the feminine? Meaning you're wondering, what is it that women want from you anymore? And how can you show up for them with your masculine presence in a way that both honors their inherent femininity and also honors, their modern freedoms, right? So you may choose to realize you need to engage more with certain feminine in your life, a friend, a daughter, a colleague, a lover, that you need to show up for her and support her in some way. And you may realize that you need to withdraw from certain women in your life, because you may discover when you really look at that dynamic that it's not representing the kinds of values that you want to endorse, and that maybe somehow that interrelationship between you and that particular woman is becoming a little bit toxic. Now, for all of us, any of us, great thing to ask this summer is just, how do I invite more of those yin and omega qualities back into my life? Meaning the joy, the relaxation, sensuality, the pleasure, the caregiving. It's the softness that we often trivialize in our modern culture that hyper endorses constant overproductivity. What's happening on the world stage with women globally this summer is that we can expect to see certain prominent women brought into the spotlight, like consider U.S. presidential candidate Marianne Williamson and the interest around her presidential running. And also some powerful women coming into the hot seat, like people taking a look at Vice President Kamala Harris. Now, don't forget, in history, go back a few years, remember there were all those debates when Hillary Clinton ran for president about whether or not a woman was even fit for that kind of office? We're definitely going to be revisiting some of those conversations. Also this summer, we can expect to see a spike in interest regarding women's rights issues around the world, such as abortion legislation and abuses against women in undemocratized countries. I mean, hello, not too long ago, Roe versus Wade abortion law was changed, And don't forget things like the women's revolt in Iran that started earlier this year and is still ongoing. We're also going to see an increased interest in missing women and missing children as the public is become more aware of the human trafficking issue around the world. So, hello, taking an interest in things like the expose of Hunter Biden's prostitute sex tape videos, and then also seeing the release of child trafficking awareness movies like Sound of Freedom, which came out in July. I find it no coincidence that that landmark movie Sound of Freedom came out in July, right as the Venus retrograde was starting. And you can bet there's going to be continued debate over defining what it means to be a man or be a woman amongst the hetero versus trans communities, and the debates about how do we give basic social rights to the LGBTQ plus community. A final key feature of the 40 days, 40 nights Venus retrograde testing period includes appearances and pleasure. From an imaging perspective, you may suddenly have the urge for a makeover during the summertime period. This could mean that you're reimagining your own personal image, such as cleaning out your closet, wondering about cosmetic enhancements, maybe just needing an overall change in your image. And it can also mean a change in your online presence and your public image. Maybe some of those photos on your Facebook, your Instagram, or LinkedIn don't really convey the kind of image that you would like them to convey. So it can be a good time to take into consideration how you're presenting yourself to the world. Now, from a space perspective, this could also mean redecorating and remodeling for some people. They've got the urge to shift the feng shui of their office or their home or something along those lines. So you may really be asking yourself, does my image or my space say to the world what I want it to say? And it's a great time for you to see how you can more authentically align your aesthetics to represent your true character and values and connect with your customer, your audience, or those that you invite into your world to really see who you are and make sure that there's no misrepresentations between the image you're projecting and who you actually are on the inside. Now, sometimes during the Venus retrograde period, I do see people that accidentally end up with makeover nightmares or big delays in remodeling. This means that they're trying to put effort into changing something about the way they're presenting themselves or their space, but there just seems to be some kind of mishap that keeps getting in the way and delaying the outcome of how they're wanting to present their personal package. With regards to play, a lot of us will be having the am I happy conversation with ourselves, meaning many people will feel called to have more joy, play, fun, free time, and pleasure in their everyday life, especially if they felt really burnt out and starved for that lately. Now, there will be a few people on the opposite end of the spectrum where they're having too much of a good time, and that over excess in indulgence is going to catch up with you. Examples of that might mean you end up going out and then getting a DUI because you weren't really being responsible with what you were doing, or something like partying too hard the night before and then underperforming in front of the boss the next day. And for some people, lots of luxury trips, travel, shopping. All of a sudden you look at your bank account and you realize you overspent a little bit on having such a good time. So be mindful of your relationship to pleasure and play this summer. We don't want it in an extreme. We always want it in balance. Most of us are probably needing more pleasure and play this summer, but be careful if you're one of those that falls on the other end, and make sure that you're being responsible with the kind of fun you're having. Worldwide themes of pleasure and entertainment are going to put Hollywood in the hot seat this summer as widespread allegations of pedophilia, adrenochrome harvesting, gross overspending, and even alleged satanic rituals are starting to taint the public's trust in what used to be our favorite entertainment institution. Not to mention, Hollywood stars themselves are unhappy. Currently, many motion picture studios are wanting actors to sign over the rights of their images and voices to be used with AI so that robots can replicate the actors in the future. Now, thank goodness for people like Fran Drescher, aka the Nanny, the now president of the Screen Actors Guild, who are standing up and saying no to AI being used to replace real actors' jobs. Similarly, the pornography industry is coming under greater scrutiny now that there's increased public awareness around issues like pedophilia, child pornography, and human trafficking. This summer, we might also expect to see some lawsuits in the beauty industry, possibly related to major fashion designers who could be discovered to be using forced child labor in third world countries, as well as major fashion designers who use brutal sourcing practices for exotic animal skins. Now, on top of that, some cosmetic surgery companies that issue injectables and implants could potentially come up with recalls this summer around certain products that are showing to be an issue for certain kinds of clientele. I mean, hello, things like breast implant illness. Okay, friends, let's add another layer on top of this epic 40-day, 40-night testing period of Venus retrograde. And that additional layer is the destiny-defining shift of the lunar nodes, which will take place over the next 18 months from July 19th, 2023 to January 5th, 2025. The lunar nodes symbolize our collective and social karmic destiny. So the north node symbolizes what we're moving towards as a society, and the south node symbolizes what we're leaving behind or reckoning with as a society. When the lunar nodes change positions every 18 months, we often see major changes in social trends. Starting in July 2023, the North Node shifts into the warrior constellation of Aries. Positively used, this could really support the rise of entrepreneurs starting their own businesses after corporate conglomerates have failed them. It could also increase the interest in military and first responder related businesses, as well as probably provoke a little bit of friendly competition between corporations and countries about who's going to be the first to do something in their field, such as a race to see who's going to be the first to colonize a new planet or the first to elect a woman or minority to an important office. Now, on a personal level, this nodal shift into the warrior constellation of Aries is going to increase our sense of independence and me first attitude. It will bring an energy of pioneering and trailblazing and boldness that a lot of us are in desperate need of. And it's also going to increase our sense of self-advocacy or ability to stand up for ourselves and what we believe in and get what we want. And it will also bring up a sense of adventurousness and courage to go out and take risks that really set our soul on fire rather than playing it safe all the time. As emblematic archetypes of this trailblazing Aries North Node energy, think of people like spiritual heroine Joan of Arc, or TV character Xena Warrior Princess, or real estate mogul turned UFO investigator Brandon Bugle. Now, the South Node shift into the peacekeeping constellation of Libra symbolizes the qualities that society is leaving behind, or perhaps that they're still working on and reckoning with. It's important to note that the North and South Node always shift into opposite constellations, meaning that part of our collective karmic destiny is to continuously learn how to balance opposites and integrate polarities into our collective thinking and to have an equilibrium instead of an extreme in our social thinking. It's also interesting to note that Aries and Libra have classically symbolized the polarities of male-female, love-hate, war-peace, individual and relationship, as well as action and attraction. The South Node shift into Libra could signify that we're finally leaving behind, or perhaps still reckoning with, issues surrounding gender inequality and masculine versus feminine ways of leadership and roles in relationships. and looking at the ineffectiveness of what's supposed to be a balanced and fair justice system, as well as looking at the suppression of feminine qualities such as play, relaxation, well-being, and joy in the face of more masculine qualities idolized by our culture, such as hyperproductivity and materialistic success. So here's the downside of this destiny shift. It's going to intensify any pre-existing conditions related to war and imbalances in interrelationships. So if we were to imagine the most extreme possibility, and I'm really just playing devil's advocate here, but you could literally interpret the nodal shift as something like we're leaving behind the peacekeeping and headed straight for the battle, or that we're leaving behind our traditional gender roles and we're headed straight for the flip-flop of gender roles and power, or that we're leaving behind the hope of even having relationships and headed towards straight up singledom. But remember this, the key to lunar nodal shifts is always in integrating both sides of a perspective and striking a balance. So let's hope that equilibrium prevails. So here's the bottom line. The 3-month summer spread from July, August to September is poised to transform our relationships, finances, gender dynamics, aesthetics, and even our social karma. There is a series of geocosmic planetary triggers which overlap, stirring up each step of the summertime transformation in order along a calendar sequence, starting this month in July with the infamous 40 days and 40 nights Venus retrograde testing period described by the Bible and Buddhist traditions. If you're feeling nervous about the summertime Venus retrograde period, the good news is that every major spiritual figure who endured the 40-day testing period, from Noah to Moses to Jesus to Buddha, always came out on top, and so will you. My job is to coach professionals like you on how to make better life decisions by being in alignment with the geocosmic energy. Because this summer retrograde series is so crazy, I'm offering a special retrograde relief discount price on all sessions with me throughout the summer for July, August, and September. So if you're wondering, what the heck has been going on with my life? Or maybe you just haven't come to see me for a while. Or maybe you're enrolled in one of my coaching programs, but you want to tack on some extra sessions to make sure you survive the summer, then click the link below and schedule your session with me at that special price. And the good news is you can use this same price and discount link throughout the summer to book as many retrograde relief sessions as you want. So be sure to save the link and share it with a friend. All right, friends, thanks for joining me here on the Future Cast. And until next time, when our stars align.